Finally, Michael Renaissance Moynihan. Michael Renaissance Moynihan is the recipient of our prize for Outstanding Student Leader, which recognizes a student's work to integrate the study of history with community and public engagement. Michael is a double major in history and philosophy. Perhaps more importantly, however, Michael has distinguished himself in recent years as a leader and activist who has sought to bring attention to matters of racial equity and justice on campus and locally. As a student who is at the forefront of the Black Lives Matter campus movement, Michael has pushed the University of Washington to honor its commitment to diversity and inclusion in substantive ways. He has also published op-ed pieces in the South Seattle Emerald, and he maintains an online blog of his writings. Throughout all of these efforts, Michael's knowledge of history and historical method has helped shape his activism and enabled him to better teach others. In this way, his work reflects the department's sense that many of our students are drawing on their studies to do important work beyond the classroom. Please welcome Hal, Julia, and Michael to the stage.
We are on stolen coastal Salish land. This means that these lands do not belong to us. It is understandable that people may look around and develop a sentiment such as John Locke had, namely that if nature has been mixed with our labor, that thing then becomes our property. There are buildings and streets and homes that exist now which have completely transformed these lands that other people have laid claim to. But there is a growing sentiment among us that what has been taken by force has no grounds to justify its ownership by the ones who took it. There is a story here, and it is a story that continues to unfold and to evolve because not only do these lands not belong to us, but the people these lands were stolen from are still alive, and upon these very lands struggling for existence, recognition, and restoration of their land rights. A historian is a storyteller, and one who unravels the threads of the tangled knots that have been woven throughout the fabrics of our existences to see who we were, so that we might understand who we are, and still yet who we might become. As the people who select the bookends and the high points to highlight, we have a tremendous responsibility because we wield more than mere stories. Stories have been used to liberate and to enslave, to bring life, and to justify mass genocide. Stories can be dangerous when they are either not true or when they are not told correctly. Like the textbooks in Texas that claim that Africans were not enslaved people, but migrants. Or that slavery no longer persists when human trafficking is a flourishing market. Migrant farmers suffer nearly unbearable conditions, and the prison industrial complex hinges on the convict leasing producing everything from paint to military-grade equipment at subsidized prices because of the exploitable labor force they possess. My experience has taught me that there is almost never a simple and comfortable truth, for life is much too complex to permit such. It is also often the case that there are those who do not want the truth to see the light of day. Totalitarian regimes have been notorious for burning books and limiting what people can say to maintain power. But so too have normal citizens, corporations, and institutions when the truth might interrupt their normal functioning. For example, Royal Dutch Shell has been implicated in the suppression or the collusion to suppress social protest movements and activities in response to the harms of oil production in Nigeria. Sometimes, at risk are free speech, liberty, and life when people seek to reveal the truth. One of the reasons for the creation of tenure was to provide protection for professors who dared to question what was presented as the truth. And like you, experts in our fields, who is better to question what is presented as the truth than the experts aside from the frontline communities who experience the events? To question history than a historian, philosophy than a philosopher, engineering than an engineer, politics than a political scientist. Like the U.S. Supreme Court appointments, tenure was useful in providing a barrier through shifting political environments so that critiques could be made, analyses done, and knowledge created. However, tenure is quickly slipping away and is being replaced by adjunct faculty without such protections. Furthermore, there was also tremendous opposition to their forming a union in its stead. Without those protections in place, then when we uncover uncomfortable truths, it will require courage to do our duty as historians, to tell the truth and the story correctly, and sometimes to tell it to those who need to hear it the most, but who want to hear it the least. As a historian and as a radical educator, as well as a Black Lives Matter activist, it is my firm belief that we should not always accept the history as it is handed to us by the public or academia. First of all, Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. was not merely some docile pacifist who touted nonviolence in the 50s and 60s. Second of all, the period between 1955 and 1975, when the United States experienced its second Reconstruction, I believe is titled incorrectly as being the Civil Rights era. Two other major vital wings of the Black liberation era, Black nationalism and Black power, without which the beneficial gains that were made would have been potentially impossible and nearly completely omitted. Third, and most important, the history that is normally conveyed to most Americans is that there were only two predominant leaders during this period, Malcolm X and Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. However, the 1955 Montgomery bus boycott was neither planned nor organized by King, rather Joanne Gibson Robinson, a teacher at Alabama State College who was also the president of the Women's Political Council, had been working on segregation issues for 2 years prior to that, and it was she who organized the boycott. Ella Baker, who was influential with the National Association for the Advancement of Colored People and also the Southern Christian Leadership Conference, was responsible for helping to organize the students of Fisk University in Nashville, Tennessee to form the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee, otherwise known as SNCC. SNCC was instrumental in the Freedom Rides, Freedom Summer, and a voter registration campaign in Selma, Alabama. And Bayard Rustin, a name almost unheard of in traditional education because he was an openly homosexual man. However, he had been working with the Fellowship of Reconciliation since the early 1940s, instructed King in 1955 that nonviolence was more than a strategy, but also a way of life, and was instrumental in the strategizing and organization of nearly every major civil rights demonstration during that period, including the March on Washington in 1963. This brief overview is not meant to invisibilize the efforts of people like Bob Moses, John Lewis, Assata Shakur, Fred Hampton, Fannie Lou Hamer, Kathleen and Eldridge Cleaver, Medgar Evers, Ann Moody, Diane Nash, and the countless teachers, lawyers, sharecroppers, carpenters, and civilians who contributed and protected each other, but I simply do not have time to convey to you the importance of their stories and contributions. It was not merely the efforts of a few, but rather the collective efforts of people from across the spectrum who employed and developed a multiplicity of tactics which was required to achieve the positive and beneficial results they did. The common thread between all the names mentioned above was their willingness to seek the truth and to make sure that something good came of it. And that is what being radical is. Furthermore, it reveals that it is going to require many, if not all of us, to ensure that we achieve justice and that the truth comes to light. With my training in history and philosophy, I have conducted research that has been vital in racial and legal equity movements both on and off campus. I helped to move the city of Seattle with Resolution 31614, which was zero use of detention for youth in Seattle in September of 2015. And currently at the UW, we have almost completed a campaign to stop procurements from and investments in prisons. Both are huge steps towards ending the school-to-prison pipeline. And these are but examples of how a radical educator can inspire positive and beneficial change. In closing, we graduates here today are at a pivotal and momentous transition in our lives when we have accomplished much to prepare for the long road ahead of us as being historians. I honor and congratulate you. You have a tremendous responsibility to our people to dig up the truth and to write it correctly. I also encourage you to be more than mere historians, but also to be radical educators who flesh out the truths underneath vulnerability and oppression, and to exhibit the courage to display those truths so that people may be liberated. Do this, and you will not only earn my gratitude,